Hello everybody, Jordan Nelson here. Today we're going to talk about how to shoot a wedding film by yourself, and this is the 2.0 version. I made a video about this about a year ago, so this is intended for beginner wedding videographers, but we're going to go into more specifics in this video about a typical wedding day and kind of what I do on a wedding by wedding basis. So the schedule of a typical wedding day can vary wedding by wedding, but usually there's kind of a theme or a general way things go, and logically it makes sense too. You start off with the getting ready portion. I just need to make sure that I can be at both places to get a few shots of the girls getting ready and the guys getting ready. Sometimes they're 15 minutes apart, so just make sure that you're able to get to both strategically there. I typically use 120 frames per second in this area to give me some nice smooth slow-mo. So in my particular style of shooting, I just do a lot of slow motion, kind of that dreamy kind of feel. And that's just the style that I go with. There's people who may prefer to do mostly real-time shots, but that's a style that I like. I might change it in the future. Maybe in my next video, I'll do a little bit more of both. Maybe 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 120. But I do a lot of 60 and 120 in the wedding videos that I shoot. After the getting ready portion of the day, typically they'll move to like a first look, or the groomsmen will get their shots by themselves and the bridesmaids will get their shots by themselves. In other weddings, they're gonna wait until the ceremony to see each other, the bride and groom. But there's usually some sort of photography going on beforehand. So I once again use 120 frames per second for that. And typically this is where you really start to more interact with the photographers as well. So they're gonna be getting their photos at the same time you're gonna be getting your video. It's easier to do some workarounds when they're just getting ready, putting on makeup, putting on their jackets, things like that, to kind of be in different places as the photographers. But now you're all with either the groomsmen or the bridesmaids or the bride and groom if they're doing the first look, you're all together. So you need to have some communication with the photographers about where they're gonna be and where you're gonna be. That's paramount is what I've learned. You wanna be able to work well together and not be getting in each other's way. And typically as the videographer, you sometimes play second fiddle to the photographer. The photographer is kind of leading where people should be, and you need to be able to break through into that. Not to get in their way or be malicious about it, but you need to say, hey, like, I'm gonna get a shot here. I've mentioned that previously before, but I've continued to learn that you need to be able to speak up to say, hey, I wanna do a certain shot, or I need to get a close-up. I don't wanna get in your photos. Just let me know whenever you're done taking this photo and I'll break in there. Now, I typically use a glide cam for all of that. I use it for the getting ready. I use it for the photos beforehand. Recently, I've been using it for the entire day, including the ceremony, which we're gonna go into next. But I've just found it a lot easier not to have to get on and off the glide cam, but I can also get smooth and even steady still shots with the glide cam. I can stabilize it on the top of a chair. I can stabilize it kind of on my leg, or even in post, if there's a little bit of shakiness, it can fix it very well. Final Cut Pro has a stabilization feature that works really well. Now, of course, I want to get the most stable shots I can while I'm there, but you do have a lot of options of stabilization, even if using a glide cam as opposed to a monopod or something like that. So in my past two weddings, I've really liked to be able to get dynamic moving shots the entire day, always to have that option. With a monopod, you still can, but you're a little bit more limited on the things that you can do. So going into the ceremony, I'm gonna spend a little bit more time on this. Where do you wanna be during the ceremony? How do you shoot a wedding ceremony? It's gonna be kind of the focus here. So I wanna get to the location where the ceremony is taking place in that room 5 to 10 minutes beforehand. I just wanna be sure I can get some shots of people walking in, or maybe there's music going on before, someone's singing, maybe there's a pianist or a guitar playing or something like that. I wanna make sure I can get those shots before the bride and groom and bridal party walk in. Now this red X here is where I set up for the processional when the bridal party is walking down. So I get on my knees, or I crouch down kind of in front of that first row. Now most ceremonies kind of have a setup like this. Not all of them are gonna be like this, but generally this is what you're gonna find. Sometimes the groom and the groomsmen come in from the side, sometimes they walk with the bridesmaids, sometimes they walk separately. There's just a lot of variation that can happen, but I'm just gonna kind of go through a typical scenario for you. So I usually shoot this part of the ceremony at 60 frames per second as the bridal party's walking in. Now once the bridal party's all through, I turn around, I get a shot of the groom. Because I'm by myself and I can't stop halfway through the bride coming down the aisle to turn around, get the groom, and then turn around, get the bride. I don't want to miss anything of the bride walking down the aisle at all. So she walks down the aisle, and as she gets to the end there, I kind of start to scoot back up along that first row. It really just depends on if the photographer would rather be on the bridesmaid or the groomsman's side. Wherever they would like to set up, I'm gonna set up on the opposite side. And then I'll just head around to the back and to the center of the aisle there, and I'll get some shots there. And for the rest of the ceremony, I'm just going around getting different shots, some of them static, some of them dynamic. I wanna make sure I get a shot of the bridesmaids, groomsmen, different angles of the bride and the groom, maybe towards the front of the ceremony, maybe towards the back. I'm gonna try to get some shots of the guests. But what I do wanna make sure of is getting that kiss at the very end. And this is where you're gonna wanna really communicate with your photographer, because if they're planning on setting up way in the back, and you're wanting to get up in the middle of the aisle there, then you're gonna have some problems because you're gonna be in their shot. Typically the photographer likes to come up to the middle of the aisle as well. And this is also where I like to have the glide cam, because I can get them having their kiss, and as they walk out and people are clapping and cheering and everyone's happy, I can follow them out. So they're walking towards me. It's a really cool shot. You can get kind of up close and personal. Right after they just got married, you can kind of see their immediate reactions as they're walking out, pretty up close. So that's a great reason to have some sort of glide cam or gimbal with you. Now, I know that might not work for everybody. A monopod works great, but that's just something I found that's been really fun and has yielded some really cool shots. And typically during the ceremony too, I hook the groom up with this DR10L Tascam lav microphone so I can get the vows and overplay that over the video. So I just start that 5 or 10 minutes before the ceremony, right before I go into the location there. And then after the ceremony, you're out taking more photos before the reception. So I use a glide cam for that too. I go back to 120 frames per second. Usually some really cool locations you get to go to, whether they picked it out, the photographers, maybe you have an idea. But those are just more your artistic shots where they just got married, everyone's excited, although maybe tired. So just remember, you want to talk with your photographer about certain shots that you want to get. Is there anything cool that you've seen in wedding videos that you want to go in and do? You can set up the bridal party exactly how you want to do it and do your shot. You're allowed to do that. You don't just have to set up exactly how the photographer has it set up. You can go in and change things. Just make sure you're being conscientious of the photographers as well though. You don't want to take too much time, so think ahead of time how you want to have it set up. Don't just start winging it once you get there. Then you get to the reception. This is where I do use 24 frames per second. I want everything in real time. It's more of a fast-paced part of the event. I don't want it as dreamy. I want it more as a celebration and everyone's dancing and having a good time. So I want to make sure I get the bride and groom and their entrance into the venue. The first dances, the cake cutting, the speeches. I use my Rode VideoMic Pro on top of my camera for the speeches, and I typically don't include those in the video as of yet. But I do send those speeches to the couple in the raw format to them so they can listen to them. I typically offer up front to send the couple the speeches, the full ceremony, raw ceremony, as well as the first dances. Now, if they have any other requests, like the cake cutting that they want, or a specific shot that they saw that I took that they would like, I can send that to them on request as well. That just kind of adds another value into your package if you say, I'm willing to send you things that maybe aren't in the highlight video that you're offering. One thing to ask the couple beforehand too is if they're gonna do an exit. Are they gonna do a sparkler exit? Are they gonna do bubbles? Are they gonna do something? Typically it's dark by the time the reception's happening, so if they're not gonna do a sparkler exit and it's gonna be outside and pitch black dark, it's probably good to know that. So you can kind of plan ahead of time saying, hey, I'm gonna leave at this time. I'm not gonna stay for the entire reception because that shot's not gonna be that helpful for me. But I know for a videographer, if they do have some cool exit like that, it could really end your video really well. But just ask ahead of time what their plans are for their exit. All right, that's all I got. Just want you guys to kind of get a flavor for you new videographers out there for kind of how a typical wedding day would look, not just generalizations about certain principles, but typically how a day would go, as well as where I am during the ceremony and the frame rates I use and slow motion and real time and all of that. Just wanted to get you a flavor for what I do. I might be changing it soon. It's good to learn and adapt and grow, and hopefully this is a good starting point for you guys. So thanks for listening. See you guys next time.